1964. Now here on the side of Manhattan right now we have Battery Park. Battery Park is is where you go if you're going to take the boat to the Statue of Liberty in Ellis Island. And you get that boat right up there by the white tent, and right next to the white tent you can see over here on the right side of the tent there's a red building. It's a circular building, a red sandstone building. It's a fort. It was built for the War of 1812. It's called Castle Clinton. And then after the War of 1812, for a while it was an entertainment complex, and then in 1855 Castle Clinton was turned into our first immigration station here in New York City. And from 1855 to 1890, 8 million people came through Battery Park and Castle Clinton on their way to a new life in America. Then in 1890, the federal government took over immigration completely, and it was moved over to Ellis Island. And we're going to talk more about Ellis Island when we get out into the harbor, because we're going to go right by Ellis Island as well. But immigration began here in 1855 in that red sandstone building you see by the white boat there. And that is one of the statue cruises that's going out to the island. Now, Lower Manhattan, there's a lot to do down here in Lower Manhattan. There's an awful lot to see, because this is the oldest part of the city, and it's got Wall Street, it's got all sorts of things, it's got several museums. On Wall Street, there's the Museum of Finance, and then right here around Battery Park, there's 3 museums, all very good. One is right across the edge of the park. See that building over there? There's a building with a red and green roof. That is a customs house from 1906, and that building houses the Museum of the Native American, which is a free museum run by the Smithsonian Institute. And it's a fascinating museum, and the building itself is one of the greatest Beaux Arts buildings in New York City. It rivals Grand Central Terminal in being one of the best buildings of that era. And it's quite a magnificent building. It was designed by the architect Cass Gilbert, who also did the Woolworth building. We will see the Woolworth building towards the end of our tour as well. And then we have here at the edge of Battery Park, we have a building. This was built as the Harbor Master's office in 1886, this little gray building with the pointed tower. And the clock in that pointed tower was installed in 1919. It was the first World War I memorial in the United States. It's right here. So this building is under extensive restoration work today. We expect it to open sometime this summer, to reopen. And we're very excited by that, because it's taken a very long time. You know, we have to preserve it. It is a landmark, and so it's just taken a while to figure out exactly what to do with it. Now, as we move past the edge of Battery Park, there's a couple more museums right up here in this area we call Battery Park City, which is right above Battery Park. And right here on the water, we have this unusual shaped pavilion, this building right here. This is the Museum of Jewish Heritage, a living memorial to the Holocaust. Very, very powerful museum. And then across the street from it, there's a hotel, and in the ground floor of that hotel is the Skyscraper Museum. And anybody who might be interested in learning more about our skyscrapers and how our city grew over the decades and the centuries, this would be the place to go, the Skyscraper Museum. There's some excellent exhibits about how these things were done, and some wonderful exhibits also dealing with the original World Trade Center, and it's really quite fascinating. Now, this land here, this land that we're alongside of right now, this was not part of the original island. This is all landfill, and the island was built up over the years by landfill. Some of the landfill here in Battery Park City, because this is the newest part of the island, some of this landfill came from the construction of the original World Trade Center. About 24 acres of this area of the city comes from the original World Trade Center construction. And in just a moment we'll be alongside the World Trade Center, and I'll be able to show you where the Twin Towers stood. Right now you should be able to see, yes, a very tall building under construction over here on the right front of the boat. This is World Trade Center number 1, under construction today. This building, when it's finished, it will be about 400 feet taller than the original Twin Towers. It will be 1,776 feet tall. In terms of meters, it is somewhere in the area of 541 meters. It's a little more, I think, than that, but it's close to that. Now, over here, as we start to move up the river just a little more, there's an open space, an open sky coming into view just in here. See that right in there? It just came into view over here on the right. That is where World Trade Center number 2 stood. The South Tower, number 2 of the Twin Towers. It was the first building to collapse on 9/11, and you would have stood right in that empty space. Now, Tower 1 of the Twin Towers, the South Tower, that stood just opposite the glass dome you see between the 2 buildings over here. It was just opposite that. That glass dome is called the Winter Garden of the World Financial Center. It's a public space. The World Financial Center was designed by the architect Cesar Pelle, and these buildings opened, I guess there was about a decade from the World Trade Center to these buildings. These buildings were heavily damaged on 9/11. In fact, most buildings here in Lower Manhattan sustained heavy damage from 9/11 because the debris from the falling Twin Towers shot out. It traveled 6 to 10 blocks. It covered a radius of 6 to 10 blocks. It was like setting off a megaton bomb down here. It was just unbelievable. And so the damage to these buildings was quite extensive. It took a year or more to repair them and get them ready to be used once again. The other building under construction right now over here, this is World Trade Center number 4. The buildings for the new World Trade Center buildings are being built around the perimeter of the 9/11 Memorial, which is a beautiful memorial to all of the people we lost on September 11th, which incorporates the actual footprints of the Twin Towers. Each building was almost a full acre square. And they've been transformed into these incredible reflecting pools, these giant reflecting pools, a full acre square, 30 feet deep. They're called reflecting absence. And all of the people we lost on 9/11 are inscribed around them, not just the casualties from New York, but the people who died in Washington, D.C. that morning, the people who were also killed in Shanksville, Pennsylvania that morning. And then there were 6 people that were killed here in 1993. There was a terrorist bombing in the World Trade Center in 1993. 6 people died in that bombing. The memorial to them was destroyed on 9/11, so they have been incorporated into this memorial today. It's a beautiful memorial. Hopefully you will all get a chance to see it while you're here. They really did a wonderful job on this memorial. So World Trade Center number 1, when it's finished, it's going to be the tallest building in New York City. Today, that title is currently held by the Empire State Building from 1931, and there's the Empire State Building up ahead of us. The Empire State Building opened in 1931. It was actually the tallest building in the world when it opened, and it held that title for about 40 years until the Twin Towers opened down here, and then the Twin Towers became the tallest building in the world for about 3 years in the 1970s until the Sears Tower opened in Chicago. But here's the Empire State Building over here, and you can visit it, go up to the observation decks on the 86th floor, the 102nd floor. You get magnificent views of New York City. You can see almost everything in New York City from the top of the Empire State Building. The one thing you cannot see is the Empire State Building itself. If you want to see that in a view, you have to go to a place like Top of the Rock, and then you get to see the Empire State Building. So as I said, this area we started as a Dutch colony in 1624, and then for 40 years we were a Dutch colony, and this entire area was known as New Netherlands. And then in 1664 the British came and they took over, and not a shot was fired because the city surrendered. The Dutch surrendered without a shot being fired, mostly because the merchants who were here were afraid that war would be bad for business, because New Amsterdam had become a thriving international trading port. At that point there were somewhere between 18 and 20 languages being spoken here. Today there are about 65 languages. We've still retained that international influence here in New York City, and in fact also New Amsterdam was started as a for-profit venture, and we still retain that today in New York as well. We're very much a for-profit venture still, the city of New York. Anyway, when the British took over, they divided the colony in two, and they used the Hudson River as the dividing line, and they created New York, which is now on our left side as we've turned the boat, and New Jersey over here on the right side. So this is New Jersey today. And this area of New Jersey where you see all these nice buildings, this is Jersey City, but we call this the Jersey Gold Coast. And it was named the Jersey Gold Coast by the real estate industry because a bunch of years ago this area was in very bad shape. It was very run down and shabby and dilapidated, and the real estate industry thought that if they gave it a new name, maybe they could get some big investors to start building some fancy new buildings. So they started to call this the Jersey Gold Coast, and their plan worked. So we have all these beautiful new buildings, and at the end of the Jersey Gold Coast, there's a very tall silver tower up here at the end. This last building, this was built for the Goldman Sachs Company. It was designed by the architect Cesar Pelle, who also did the World Financial Center over in Lower Manhattan. And this building, tallest building in New Jersey, it's 781 feet tall. And here it is up at the end of the Jersey Gold Coast. And then next to it, those of you here on the right side of the boat can already see it, there's that big clock next to the Goldman Sachs building. It says Colgate on it. The Colgate Company had their headquarters in New Jersey for many, many years. They didn't move out actually until the 1980s. But in 1906, they created a big clock, a 50-foot diameter clock, to celebrate their 100th anniversary and to commemorate the first Colgate product, which was called Octagon Laundry Soap. So this clock you see here is actually not the original one. That was 1906. This one is from 1924, but it is a replica of that original clock, and it sits over here on the water, right on the site of where the Colgate company used to have a manufacturing plant. And so it's the Colgate clock. And let's see, have they, you know what? They remembered daylight savings time. They'd often forget to wind the clock. It's often not even keeping the correct time, but obviously they got it right this morning. So we're going to go past the Colgate clock. We're going to go out into the harbor now. We're headed down there to the Statue of Liberty. Now, the New York Harbor, this was the place, this was the #1 place for immigration in the U.S. in the beginning of the 20th century. Everybody wanted to come to New York, and more people came through here than all the other port cities in the United States combined. This was the #1 place. So between 1892 and 1924, it was about 12 million people came through the port of New York on their way to a new life in America. And so what they would do is they would go through Ellis Island, but then if they weren't staying here in New York, they would be taken to a train station. The train station is up here. Up on the right now, there's a little red brick Victorian building up there, and that's the Central Railroad of New Jersey terminal. And it's there they would catch trains that would take them out to the rest of America to begin their life, their new life here. And today, so many people came through this area that today in 2012, 40% of the entire population of the U.S. has at least one relative that came through here between 1892 and 1924. Now, there's usually always somebody on the boat. I mean, a lot of you are visitors today, but I have some ladies here. Any of you have a relative? I see two of them right here. So it always happens because so many share that with all of us, and so we're very grateful. Now, as we turn the boat, here we have an elevated highway. This is the FDR Drive. It's a highway that goes all the way down to Manhattan, from the Upper East Side all the way down into the Battery. And it was created by a man named Robert Moses. He was a city planner here in the 20th century, very, very powerful man. He almost always got his way. His big obsession was to build roadways and superhighways. And if you lived in the way of one of his projects, you almost always lost your home. You had no recourse. And what's most interesting about Mr. Moses, see that? See that gold set? That is the municipal building. That's from 1913. It was built as a symbolic portal between New York and Brooklyn. And that little statue on the top, the statue is called Civic Fame. And the most incredible thing to me about this statue is the woman who was the model for the statue. We know who it was. Her name was Audrey Munson. And the reason we know her is because she's almost like the first supermodel ever in history, because she was the #1 model in the years before World War I, and every artist wanted to use her. And today, because of that, there's somewhere between 15 and 22 statues around the city that she was the model for. She also appeared in 4 silent films. I just think there's something really neat about the idea that there was a supermodel in the years before World War I. Now, just behind the Verizon building, just coming into view, there's a white building with a pale green pointed top. There it is. That is the Woolworth building. The Woolworth building was the tallest building in the world from 1913 to 1930. And it's so ornately decorated. It's the most ornately decorated skyscraper. And its nickname is the Cathedral of Commerce, because it almost looks like a great Gothic cathedral. This is within walking distance of the seaport. It's right over by City Hall. And it's really magnificent. You get up close, you just can't believe the ornamentation on this building. It is really way over the top. And then we also have the Silver building with the ripples in it. This is a new building. It's by the architect Frank Gehry. It's called New York by Gehry, and it's the tallest residential tower in North America at 870 feet with over 900 apartments. And Mr. Gehry said that his inspiration to put the folds in his building was the gown on the Statue of Liberty. And so now here comes the South Street Seaport, and we're going to be docking here in just a moment. We're headed right towards that. We're going to pass under the Brooklyn Bridge and go back where our journey began. The South Street Seaport is a very historic part of New York City. This is where shipping began. This is where, by the 1800s, by 1800, before the early 1800s, before steamships, New York City had become the largest seaport in the United States. more trade was done here than anywhere else. We were trading all over the world. Some merchants here in the South Street Seaport began international trade with China in the early 1800s. It began here from the South Street Seaport. There's another group of merchants that invented the clipper ship, which took days off the transatlantic voyage. And another group of merchants decided to do something really unique. Ships used to leave Port Evan about 4 weeks ago, and they have a very modest entry fee. It's only $5. But they've got some great exhibits. I encourage you, if you've got the time, to explore this area. And if you can't find a good guidebook, find yourself a good guide to take you around. There's a lot of guides know a lot about this area. It's a really important part of our history. But then if you're not interested in history, you just want to do some fun things, you can visit the Bodies exhibit over here, which shows you.
사진 찍으려고 대섰습니다요.
근데 그 조사를 못해 왜? 저기 조사.
공부를 하고 있고 오늘은 안 하죠. 그리고 1870년부터 저 앞에 저 얼굴 조금 내밀고 있는 계단 있는 건물이 페더럴 하우스예요. 거기서 1870년에 저 대통령으로 취임했죠. 조선으로 워싱턴이. 그래서 워싱턴 동상이 있는데 또 같은데.
증권거래소라고?
머무는 동안에 한 끼도 못 드셨답니다. 뭘 몰래 드실 개인적으로 드실 수도 있었겠지만 국가 원수급의 의전 경호를 받기 때문에 한인타운에 올 수도 없었고 그래서 그랬다고 고생을 했대요. 3월부터 6월, 9월부터 11월 사이에 이 회기가 열리면 198개 회원국 깃발이 걸립니다. 오른쪽에 지금 이 하얀색 건물이 이게 본 회의장 건물이고요. 룩셈부르크에서 기증한 Could you stop for a second behind the yeah. Or front. Yeah, front. 여기 내리면 딱지예요. 바로 경찰들에서 딱지인데 보시면은 저 사람들 있는데 조그만 오른쪽에 권총이 보여요. 권총 총신이 묶어놓은 조그만 조각이 보이는 저게 룩셈부르크에서 기증한 건데요. 저것이 그 유엔 평화를 위한다는 그 목표에 걸맞는 조각품으로 총신이 묶여져 있죠. 권총 총신이 보이세요? 오른쪽으로. 네, 저게 상징 건물처럼. 그다음에 저 구리 만든 저 커다란 지구 같은 것은 환경 오염 경각을 돕기 위해서 이탈리아에서 기증한 것이요. 한 것이고 어차피 지금 내리면 바로 와서 딱지를 띄는데 내려봐야 저 앞에까지 지금 사람들 사진 있던 저기까지밖에는 못 가요. 그 안에 비지터들은 따로 등록을 하고 아이디 보여주고 하는 누군가의 제안에 즉석에서 이 미술관을 건립하기 위한 준비위원회가 조직되고 거기서 즉석에서 도네이션을 하기 시작하면서 미술품도 하나 없고 예술품도 없고 건물도 없고 그런 데서 준비위원회 모금부터 시작돼서 그때부터 그 만들기 설립하기 위한 계획이 착수됩니다. 미국의 부러운 점 하나는 여러분들도 아시다시피 작품들이 있는데 스테인글라스의 종교적인 그림만 보셨다가 성당에서 가서 보시면은 정말 이렇게 정교하게 잘할 수 있나 감탄이 나옵니다. 그런 거 하며 조각, 의류, 악기, 무기, 이집트 미라서부터 한국관, 중국관, 일본관 다 있어요. 사람이 솜씨를 뽐낼 수 있는 건 다 있어요. 380만 점 정도가 소장되어 있는데 다 전치를 못합니다. 그래서 교체 전치를 하죠. 그래서 멤버십을 들고 계속 와서 보고 합니다. 우리는 짧은 시간이에요. 1시간 반밖에 안 되지만 짧은 시간이지만 효과적으로 보시기 위해서 우선 로비로 들어가시면 왼쪽 오른쪽에 라인이 두 줄이 서 있을 겁니다. 그게 한쪽은 캐시, 한쪽엔 크레딧 이렇게 써져 있는데 캐시 라인에 쓰십시오. 그래서 거기서 돈을 내시고 입장표를 받으셔야 되는데 입장표가 M자가 쓰여져 있는 동그란 배지를 줘요. 그 배지를 받아서 옷깃에 보이는데 이렇게 접어서 부착을 하고 가운데 동그란 인포메이션에 사람들이 앉아 있는데 거기서 코리안 맵을 달라고 그러세요. 중국 거, 일본 거, 뭐 영어도 있지만 한국 거, 서경덕 그 운동하는 그 사람이 줄기차게 3년을 요구해서 여기서 한국말 지도를 만들어준 거니까 우리가 써줘야 됩니다. 안 그러면 안 만들죠. 그걸 받으셔서 어디부터 갈 건지 보셔야 돼요. 뭐 그 피카소가 아프리카 영향을 받아서 그렸던 현대 미술부터 또 후기 인상판 네덜란드의 렘브란트가 50점 정도의 작품을 자화상을 남겼죠. 제일 많은 자화상을 남긴 화가 중에 한 명인데 52살 때 그린 빵떡모자 쓴 그림이 여기 있습니다. 그래서 그게 보시고 싶으시면 렘브란트는 찾기가 어려우니까 2층 오른쪽으로 가셔서 곳곳에 이렇게 있는 사람들한테 세큐리티한테 Where's the 렘브란트 말만 해도 가르쳐 줄 거예요. 그것도 한번 보시든지 미라를 보시든지 이것저것 볼게 보석 세공 하면서 볼 게 너무 많습니다. 스치면서 지나가도 시간이 모자라요. 그래서 어디부터 가실 건지 그것도 보시는데